Bubblers, and welcome to Bubblers Corner. I'm your host, Chris Catanese, aka Bubbledad, and you're probably thinking, hey Bubbledad, what is Bubblers Corner? Well, let me tell you. It's a new feature here on the AOIBA Facebook page where we're going to be presenting a topic and members can watch the video, discuss on the thread below in the discussion section. If there's an activity, we're going to make something today. You'll be given the materials. You can make it, test it out, post videos of what you've done, and questions can go back and forth. And one of the great things about that will be putting in contact people that don't know each other, but also that have an expertise in one area or another where someone doesn't. And there's definitely, when there are newer members and more veteran members, it's kind of intimidating for the newer members. So this will hopefully help bridge that gap, bring people together, and expand everybody's knowledge base. For anybody who was at Bubblefest Cleveland, after Bubblefest, a discussion thread was created on Messenger called Bubblers of Cleveland, and it's been fantastic. It's just been this long thread of people posing questions, people responding. There must be 50 to 75 topics that have been brought up, and they just keep going, and it's great. But therein lies a bit of the issue, is that it's never ending, kind of. And when someone poses a question, they'll get responses, and then someone else will pose a question, and that'll get responses. But then somebody will respond to the previous question, so it's kind of disjointed. What we want to do with Bubblers Corner is have a topic like bubble foamers, so that when you go to this Facebook post, all of the discussion will be right there below in the discussion. So I hope you'll tune in every 2 weeks. And before we dive into our first topic, bubble foamers, a little housekeeping. If you have not already updated your member profile page on the new AOIBA website, please do that. Back in the fall, Damien sent out very easy how-to on how to log in, create your account. It's super easy to update your profile, pictures, video, description, and there's no downside. It's the member directory that the public can access. You could make money. No reason not to. So if you haven't done that, run out and do that. Not right now because I'm about to do a show, but after you've watched this video, run out and do that. Okay, let's get started. Bubble foamers. So today's presentation is going to be kind of a little bit of different things. It's going to be kind of Bubble Foamers 101, going over the basics for anybody who's never really incorporated much bubble foam in their act. I'm going to do some more advanced stuff, and I'm also going to demo how to make a simple bubble foamer and talk about the process for making more intricate ones, which just take more time than we have. But to join along in the demo, what you're going to need is a plastic bottle, water bottle, any kind of plastic bottle, except Poland Spring. They don't work. They're too thin. It's really annoying. Cut the end off, and then you're going to need some nice strong duct tape. I've always used Gorilla tape. It's great. This is actually Gorilla waterproof tape, which isn't as easy to find. I don't think Home Depot's carrying it any longer, but it's great. It's very strong. So you need some good duct tape. Regular Gorilla tape is fine. And a piece of fabric. And the fabric is really the key to bubble foamers. In my show, I teach the kids that bubbles come from holes. Bubble wands, pretty much anything that has a hole, a tube, can make a bubble. And bubble foamers are made with fabric. What is fabric? But a series of threads that go back and forth, and in between all the threads are tiny little holes. In the fabric world, they call the number of threads that go through any given inch of space as the thread count. So if something has a high thread count, you'll know from sleeping, it's a more comfortable sheet. And the holes are smaller because there are more threads in that square inch. Something with a lower thread count has bigger holes and will make slightly bigger foam bubbles, which you might be thinking, oh, all foam bubbles are tiny. Well, there's tiny, and then there's really tiny, and then there's like micro tiny. And then some of them are actually kind of big. So I'll go through that and talk about kind of my favorite materials that I use, and then in the discussion, this is rife for people talking about their favorite materials. I did a test last summer where I took 7 of these funnels and used 7 different materials, and the one that came out the best was my favorite. Terry cloth towel. This is a thick gray bath towel. This is a beach towel. This is a piece of heavy gauge sweatshirt, which I also like using. You can use microfiber towels. They dry faster. They don't get as heavy because this kind of gets heavy when it gets really wet. I don't like the size of the bubbles as much as I like the terry cloth towel. Yeah, and it's fun to experiment and play around with. Okay, let's give you a look at what's here on the table, just to give you a sense of the bubble foamer world. So, on the left there, with the stripes, that is my 18-inch automotive oil change funnel with a piece of beach towel on it. That I use that every show. It's crowd pleaser. People love it. It's awesome. Makes a ton of foam. And then in the foreground in front of it, we have the one I just showed, the bottle. And I use one just like that in my show, every show. Then a smaller one, which I'll use if it's a very small venue. Most times I'm in, gymnasiums and auditoriums. It's not an issue. I need a lot of foam. But if I'm in a very small space, I'll use a smaller one because it can be overpowering. It's a lot of foam. Then there's a couple of just random funnels that I'm working on that don't have faces yet. And there's a rectangular funnel. And then I do shapes. So there's a star over there, a car in the back, and a heart in the left back next to the stripey one. And over there, there's a empty 18-inch automotive funnel. Now, as you're getting into making your own, the most important thing to me about the funnel that you choose is the lip. A lot of kitchen funnels will just go straight out, like on an angle, and there's no lip. Those are very hard to work with because if you're going to be using any kind of a blower to blow the air, like a small leaf blower like this, or use a handgun type, this, they blow a lot of air, and they can blow your fabric right off. So often I will reinforce. I'll start with tape. I'll start with the Gorilla Tape. And for small ones like this where I'm going to be blowing with my mouth, that's fine. It'll probably never blow a hole in it. But these can blow a hole. And here's a good example of this one, which has been through the trenches. It pulled off from the funnel here. So I didn't put it in with anything stronger, so I just reinforced it with some screws, more over here. But when I'm more intentional about making my foamers, I will use tacks, basically upholstery tacks around the top. They're like thumbtacks, but they're stronger. If you've never used an upholstery tack, here's an example of one. It's got a big curved head and a long spike. You can see how long that spike is. And they're great specifically for this because you can put it in right at the top after you've taped it to just really keep that top tight. Oh, and there's a couple different ways. So I mentioned you can blow into them like this. It's just you dip it, you blow. These, the bigger ones, need to be, no way you can blow into that. So you need typically a small leaf blower. I'm not sponsored by the Ryobi Corporation or Home Depot, but I love this little guy. I've got 3 of them. And the nice thing about it is where the nozzle would go to blow leaves fits perfectly into a 1 1/4 inch PVC elbow, which also fits nicely on the funnel end. It's not perfect with this particular one, which I get on Amazon. You have to shave it a little bit. You have to file it down to get it to fit. But basically, it fits nicely on there. This fits perfectly in there, and you're good to go. And what I like about the elbow is it allows you to do this. So you dip it, and we'll go outside and we'll do some video in a little bit. But you dip it, you put it on, you add the air, the bubbles come up, but what are you going to do with them? You just take this off. It comes out that easily, and then you can spray. And as I mentioned before, it is a crowd pleaser extraordinaire. Outside, it is beyond fun. You can just chase kids around with bubble foam. It's really fun. And inside, it's great, too. It works really well. Other ways of getting the air into the bubble foamer, large tubing, which comes in really handy if you are doing gags where you put bubbles like on kids' heads. This is a great way because this is actually a little too long, but you can just direct it wherever you want to go, and putting bubbles on kids' heads. Come on, that's super fun. And these fit in a variety of different types of things. This, I forget which size this is, but it fits in the mouth of this guy. It fits in bottles nicely. You'll have to make it airtight with some electrical tape. Is a good tape, a good adhesive to use. As I mentioned, I'm not going to make a shape blower. These are fairly tricky. This part isn't tricky. It's the same process as the others. Getting a piece of fabric, attaching it to the funnel, and then to make the shape, you're just gonna using like a rubberizing paint. I use Flex Seal. That's got to be a very, very thick paint. You can't use. You would think that a household paint, several coats of it, would be solid. It's not. There are holes there, and bubbles come through it. So a rubber paint, and just do basically a stencil of the shape that you want, and the bubbles extrude up through the shape, and then you can cut them off just like a Smile Cloud machine. It's just that it's a lot lighter and more portable. It definitely doesn't compete or compare because there's also, it doesn't have the consistency. You have to dip like you would have to dip anything. All right, I think we're ready to move on to our demo of a very basic bubble foamer using plastic bottle, duct tape, and a piece of fabric. I'm using a piece of gray terry cloth bath towel. As I had mentioned earlier, the thread count makes a big difference. So if you're going to be using something with a high thread count like towel, or this is a heavy gauge sweatshirt, you're going to get very small bubbles, very white looking bubbles because they're going to be so tightly packed. If you use something with a much lower thread count like a sock, you're going to get much bigger bubbles. Like, you'll see the bubbles. It's not like a solid thing of white. You actually see the bubbles. And I do this every show. I do a DIY element where I teach the kids and encourage their parents and teachers that this is super fun and super easy to do at home. All you need is a cardboard tube. I tape the end of it because if you use it all the time, it's going to get soggy. But it dries. I use the same one over and over again. Little pro tip. This is actually not a paper towel roll. It looks like a paper towel roll, but it was some kind of cardboard tubing from, it might have been wrapping paper or plastic wrap. A lot of things come in with good cardboard tubes in them, and they're great. You can use them, and it's relatable. It's identifiable, and people can, be like, oh yeah, I have that. I can do that. And just little toddler socks. And all you do is pull the toddler sock over your tube, hold it tight, and you can put some rubber bands around there or zip tie to hold it really tight. And then you're going to dip it in your bubble solution. Now, I'll bring it a little bit closer and hopefully it'll focus on it. You can see the bubbles. You can see through them. It's not like a solid wall of white because socks have a very low thread count. It's just fun. Now I'll do sweatshirt and you'll see the difference. See, much smaller bubbles and you get that solid white foamy effect. And one thing about bubble foam that affects every type of foamer you use and every type of fabric you use, when you first do it, it's going to be wetter and heavier. So your first, batch, your first, blow if you're blowing, or your first shot of air, the first one's going to be wetter. And they fall fast and they make a big mess. So when I'm performing, inside, if I'm going to be blowing bubbles on the kids, not so much with these. These are not very wet. But if I'm using something like this, the first is extremely wet. I never do it near the kids. I'll do it like in my space, shoot it straight up and be like, ah, and then the next batch will be much drier. And when I go out to the kids, it will not make as much of a mess. And it evaporates, dries pretty quickly. Let's make one. All right, so I'm going to use a Fiji water bottle. I like these because it's fun that they're square, it's different, but also it gives it a little bit more rigidity through the end, so it's a little bit stronger. It holds its shape a little bit better. And you want to cut as close to the edge as you can. You can use, a sharp knife, a paring knife, or razor blade, whatever. It doesn't have to be perfect because you're going to be covering it with fabric and tape, but you don't want it to be too lopsided. And you can always just trim it with a pair of scissors if it is lopsided. Yeah, mine's a little lopsided, so. There we go. Okay. Now, you can take a piece of fabric. This has obviously been used before. And you're going to just want to find a part of it that covers that whole opening, but overlaps by like a 1/2 inch on each side, because you don't want it too long because then you have a lot to get rid of. So, one way is you can just turn it upside down and take a marker. So I've got a rough outline. I'll cut that out. There's your piece of fabric. Now, you want the fabric on there as tight as you can, and the easiest way to do that is to pre-cut a bunch of small strips of duct tape. Use maybe 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch wide pieces, and you're gonna need a bunch of them. It depends on how big your bottle is, but you want to go all the way around. You don't want to have any openings where air can get out. That's a killer with foamers. If it leaks anywhere, it ruins it. The foamer won't work. The air will escape out that much bigger hole if there's an opening on the side, and you don't get any foam. So it's important that it's really sealed well. So you're gonna tape one side, kind of hold it on the other side, and tape it there. Then you're gonna go around to the opposite side and do that. You're just gonna keep doing that, alternating, going from opposite side to opposite side. Now I've attached it to the towel and I'm gonna pull it, not super tight, I don't wanna crush the bottle, but as tight as you can without crushing the bottle. And then we'll do the other sides. Okay, once you've got it taped down, nice and taut, we're going to add a layer of tape right around the edge, bringing it right to the lip of the plastic bottle underneath. With a bottle this small, I'm going to use half of a strip of 2-inch duct tape. The fabric material as tight as you can around there. Now, you get it really tight, it's still not good enough. It'll work as a bubble former, but there are, let's see it, there are always going to be little gaps, and inherently that's just a hole that's going to be covered with bubble solution, and it's bigger than the thread holes, so it's going to make bigger bubbles, and they're going to be coming out the side, and it's just not going to look clean and neat. So once you've got it as tight as you can, I will drizzle glue right around the edge. Whatever glue you feel comfortable with. I will say this: if you use crazy glue, it can be kind of toxic. Like, just the glue hitting fabric can actually create smoke. So test your fabric before you add the glue, and if it creates, smoke like that, you want to try a different glue. If you use like epoxy resin with part A and part B, that works really well, because it'll be kind of stiff around the edge, and you'll lose a tiny bit of surface area of your foamer, but you won't get the little side bubbles. And since I'm not going to glue it, you'll see what I mean with the side bubbles. And then let's dip this and see what we get. All right, actually didn't get much. It got pretty tight. The duct tape adhered nicely to the towel around the edge, so there weren't a lot of gaps. Over time, they'll form, and you'll get. Now you can see this is somewhere between kind of the sweatshirt, which was even smaller bubbles than this, and the sock, which was bigger bubbles than this. And again, they kind of all have their, for me anyway, places where they work well. Since I want, a lot of times I want bubbles that are going to be light enough to fly. I like having this size kind of in the middle with the terry cloth towel. I look forward to, if you've never done this before, this is the first time making a bubble foamer, take a video, post it down below, and if you have any questions, ask questions about it. I'm not going to do a demo of these other methods. I'm just going to show them in a little more detail. So if I was doing one like this with a lip, it'd be the exact same idea, where you take the fabric, I'm going to use my tablecloth, cover it, have about a 1/2 inch around, and then do the same thing. Tape it opposite sides all the way around. And then, because it's got the lip, I always like to go in with the upholstery tacks. It's gonna fight the power of the air blower that's gonna go through there. And I'll show you how easy these go through pretty easily. So I just pushed it in. And it's in there. It's in there very nice. And this is exactly where you don't want to have a kitchen funnel. Because if you have a kitchen funnel that's going up at an angle, like if I were to put this in this angled part here, it would actually be pointing up, almost through your fabric on top, and it kind of hurts. With a bigger one, I will just take Flex Seal paint, which would work perfectly with this to cover the edges. but I like to go over the edges with a coat of Flex Seal paint, because it's rubber and nothing gets through it. Demonstrate the basic idea behind my shape maker. So it's a very different method. If you've ever seen a Smile Cloud machine, it works in a different way than mine. It fills a cavity underneath, and ultimately it extrudes the bubbles up through the shape. Here, we're pushing the air and the bubbles are coming, they're being extruded up. There's nothing below. The bubbles just come out of the shape. It's not like it's filling up with bubbles and they're going through that opening. They're coming out of the opening just because of the air. And one of the challenging things about this that took me the longest time, years ago when I first was playing around with shapes and trying to get them to come out, I kept having problems with different parts of the shape coming out either faster or slower than other parts. And what I realized was the mechanism, which is a garbage can, it's a metal like trash can, and I have cut openings for the air vents, both blowing and sucking in air, and I've created a kind of molded base for my blower to sit in. So it sits in there. I'll show you this way. And from here, you're going to take, for this part, I use a straight 1.25 inch piece of PVC. This one happens to have an outlet. I have that blocked off because I'm not using that. So it's just a straight thing. And the reason, this was the tricky thing. The reason I was getting a lot of uneven distributions of where the foam was coming out was because when I was using the elbow, it was hitting the back of that and then kind of rebounding. The air was coming towards the end. The side was actually closer. And it still does with this. It's just that it doesn't really matter that much when it's just this much and it's an open and it's just all the same thing. When you're trying to get a shape to come out, it's got to come out evenly. Otherwise, you're not going to see the shape. So when I realized that, I just made it a straight piece, which means you have to have the thing shooting straight up. And then you put your shape foamer in there. And you want to use a low setting if you have the multiple speeds. And I do suggest ones that have lock-in speeds, as opposed to, there are some leaf blowers that have a trigger where you adjust it yourself, and that's not good for bubbling. There's a delay to it, and you can't control the speed with as well as you can with, a 1, 2, 3. And I usually do on the lowest. To make shapes, I do it on the lowest because you don't want to blow it out. Will they fly? You may know that Smile Clouds have compressed air and helium, maybe other things, I don't know, but I know that there's compressed air and helium coming up through the mix. So with helium in the, going into the bubbles, it's going to go up, it's going to fly. On this model with the car, I have a hole where I can, let's put this one out, where I can insert a helium, a tube from a helium tank. I've done it that way. I've done it, many times that way. And what I realized is, one of my biggest things is how much gear I will carry to any given gig. I don't typically, have anybody with me, So I try and get everything into like one big huge cart that comes from my car to wherever the performance space is. And lugging one of those, party balloon things is just an extra thing. And what I noticed is, I only do this when I'm outside. I never do this inside. If there's any breeze at all, it's gonna catch them, and they're gonna fly. The first one's not so much. So the first ones are gonna be heavy because it's gonna be wet, like we talked about before. But then, like second, third, fourth, fifth ones fly beautifully. After about 5, 6, you need to redip. And the nice thing about that is that without them going straight up because of the helium, and I know like smile clouds, you can adjust the amount of helium so that they don't go straight up, that they kind of hover a little bit, which is really fun. The kids love to chase them and catch them. And with this, everyone basically comes out. Sometimes the wind is very strong and it carries them fast, but it's very easy to get the kids to catch them. All right, I think I've shown everything I want to show. I think we should go outside and make some bubbles. Hello, bubblers. Welcome to my backyard, and I'm going to show off some of the bubble foamers we were talking about inside. I'm going to show you some things that are just to show you the difference between different types of fabrics, different types of techniques as you use them, and some of the things that I do in my show that you are free to lovingly emulate, but please don't rip me off. You guys. My bread and butter 18-inch foamer. If you're going to be using it, during a performance, I suggest dipping it once before the show, getting it wet, because sometimes different parts of it won't get fully wet on a single dip. Let's see. No, that got fully wet, but still. Okay. So as you can see, it's wet coming out. So that first batch is going to be wet, as evidenced by. Now this I have on 3. I have on the fullest power, but I like to do it slowly, just to anticipation. Okay, now, whoa! Look at that. See how heavy and wet it is? And now it's a little lighter. And yeah, kids are smiling. They look like clouds. It's a smile cloud. It just looks like an actual cloud. Other things you can do. Well, here I'm going to just do a really high one, as high as I can go, and balance it. But I'm still going to get rid of that first layer of wet stuff. And then the obverse, the reverse. So you can clearly see how much lighter the top is. You can see through it. There's a huge bubble there, very tight at the bottom. And again, this is using beach towel. Which again, I like this level of bubble because it lets them fly nicely. Just kind of cut one off there. So, other foamer types. These are my DIY ones that I use in my show, and I start with this one. I mentioned this. Maybe I didn't mention this. Looks like a solid black cube, but there's a water bottle in there, and I've just covered it. I've made a box, a cube, out of corrugated plastic, covered it with Gorilla Tape, and the bottom. The fabric is towel, but then I put a layer of like satiny, it's part of an old curtain drop behind me. So it looks solid. I don't show the kids that much. I try and keep it away. I also try and keep the hole away at the beginning. But then I do explain the hole, because kids will see it and they're like, "Hey, there's a hole." So my setup is that bubbles come from holes. What if the hole is solid? Can I blow a bubble through a solid? No, of course not. You're right. I do have one magic trick. What if I blow a bubble through a solid? And I kind of spin it, and then I go back quickly, and then and this will give you a sense of like the endless possibilities that you could do with bubble foam. Is that I'm going to make a snowman out of bubbles. I asked them who they think my favorite snowman is. Sometimes they'll say Frosty. It is not. It is Olaf, so I make Olaf out of bubbles. So his base starts out like most snow people, big base. And the middle section is a little bit smaller, but a little bit taller. Of course, the wind picks up. Let's see if we can hold on there. Yeah, outside this is a tough one. I will often have the kids form a wall. And then, what are his arms made out of? Kids yell out, sticks. This is a great little one. It's just a little plastic tube with a piece, same thing, just a little foamer. But let's do things like this. Give them arms. This one's actually a little bit, this one needs to be cleaned. There we go. And then Olaf's head. Is Olaf's head round like most snow people? No, what shape is it? Oval. Okay, we give him an oval head. And this is another great opportunity to explain. And here I'm really talking to the teachers, the parents. I have a background in professional development workshops for teachers as a facilitator. And I talk directly to the teachers, especially when I'm working with younger kids at like a kind of Montessori school type young kid setting. Because this is how they can extend bubble play in the classroom. My master's degree is in education, so I like to throw out those education terms to encourage the teachers to try this stuff. So give them an oval head. Okay. And then what's his hair made out of? Sticks! Yeah, let's get some more sticks. What's his nose made out of? Carrot! Yeah, let's give him a carrot nose. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Olaf from Frozen. No, Olaf! Of course, that was meant to happen. But the idea that with different size foamers, you can make all kinds of shapes. I used to do, when I was inside doing my virtual shows, I would do a dinosaur, because without wind it was easier. So with 4 stumpy legs, big body, long tail, long neck, and a head that came up, and it really did look like kind of Apatosaurus. All kinds of shapes you can do. I know a lot of people think CJ puts a face on it, which is super cute. Like a printed out, she's a panda. I don't know, different faces. I love foam, and I don't know if I mentioned it inside, but my very favorite thing about foam is it is almost completely weather independent. Doing shapes and things like this, yeah, wind is tough, but it is fail-safe. It will work in almost any condition other than super high wind, and even then, the big one will work. So it's a great trick to have in your tool belt. All right, and here is the one I mentioned yesterday. If you want to, this is one attached to a piece of tubing, which is great if you want to put it, on a kid's head. And this one is the one that is sweatshirt material, so you can see it's a little bit denser, a little bit whiter, which works well for doing hats and work like that. Oh, and this is not a foamer, but it's similar. Whenever I put a whole bunch of straws together, I call it a bubblinator. So this is a mega bubblinator with about, 50, 75, 100 cocktail straws in it. And it's a really great effect because basically it's a foamer, but they're bigger, much bigger bubbles. I'll come closer. So it's a great way to show them that bubble foam is bubbles. It's not just foam. foam is a series of lots of bubbles, and you can see that here because it's a bunch of bubbles connected, but here you can really see the individual bubbles. And with older kids, this is my favorite geometry little lesson. Ask them if they see shapes inside, and I'll go up and they'll see, pentagon, hexagon, square, cube, rectangle. Sometimes the kid will say icosahedron. And sometimes a kid will say a dodecahedron. Bubble shapes. I'm going to bring these up closer so you can see this. Tank of helium. I have adapted it to have a hose coming out of it into the PVC pipe. This is going to get wet and then go on top. Oh, my cutter. I don't think I mentioned cutters yesterday. For this size, pizza peel works great. Love my pizza peel. So the first ones, again, are going to be scrapped. You just automatically scrap. Too wet. Too wet. Now, these should be good. So, technique-wise, if you give it a little twink, it usually will get up in the air. Yeah, kind of nicely. They're going to be able to catch them. And you can help them too. Yeah, you break them. A heart. Stars.